The room was designed to feel safe. Soft lights, neutral colors, two armchairs angled slightly inward as if encouraging honesty. But safety doesn't come from furniture. It comes from tone. And tonight, tone was already slipping. By the time one of them crossed her legs a second too sharply, everyone behind the cameras knew this wouldn't end like a conversation. It would end like a decision. The studio felt less like a television set and more like a carefully curated living room. No audience, no applause, just two women and the expectation of honesty. Denise Welch sat on the left, posture relaxed but attentive, legs crossed neatly, hands resting together as if she'd learned long ago that stillness could be more powerful than interruption. Her expression was open, professional, neutral but observant. Across from her sat Meghan Markle, black sleeveless dress, knee-high boots, hair loose, perfectly arranged, but not casual enough to be accidental. She leaned back slightly, one arm resting along the curve of the chair, chin lifted just enough to suggest confidence or distance. The microphones picked up the quiet hum of the room as the red recording light came on. Denise smiled. Not a television smile, not exaggerated, a human one. "Thank you for joining us," she said. "This is meant to be a calm, open conversation. No panels, no interruptions, just us." Meghan nodded once. "Of course," she replied. "I prefer conversations without noise." The words landed softly, but something in the way she said noise lingered a fraction too long. Denise didn't react. Not yet. "That's exactly why we wanted this format," Denise continued. "Loose Women is about honesty, especially when things aren't simple." Meghan tilted her head slightly. "Well," she said, "simple stories are usually the most dishonest ones. A beat, not confrontational, not yet, but sharp enough to register." Denise let it pass smoothly. "You've spoken a lot over the years about reclaiming your voice," she said, "about feeling misunderstood. Tonight, without headlines or sound bites, what do you want people to understand?" Meghan smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I think people misunderstand why I'm careful," she said. "They confuse boundaries with attitude." She paused, then added lightly, "Especially when a woman refuses to explain herself repeatedly." Denise nodded, slow and thoughtful. "That makes sense," she said, "though some might say conversation requires explanation." Meghan's smile tightened. "Only when the listener is actually open," she replied. The air shifted, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Denise adjusted slightly in her chair, folding one leg over the other. Her voice remained even. "You've chosen to be here tonight," she said gently. "So I assume you're open to dialogue." Meghan glanced briefly toward the camera, then back to Denise. "I'm open to meaningful dialogue," she said. Not the recycled curiosity people mistake for depth. There it was. Not an outburst, not a fight, just a subtle repositioning. Meghan above the conversation, Denise suddenly having to prove she belonged in it. Denise inhaled slowly. "Fair enough," she said. "Let's talk about meaning then." She leaned forward slightly, not confrontational, but engaged. "You've often spoken about stepping away from environments that felt unhealthy," Denise continued. "What did that cost you emotionally?" Meghan didn't answer immediately. She shifted her weight, crossing her legs more tightly now, one hand lifted, fingers gently touching the microphone stand as if grounding herself or claiming space. "It cost me peace," she said. "But peace isn't free when people profit from misunderstanding you." Denise nodded. "And yet," she added carefully, "some would argue that visibility brings responsibility." Meghan's eyes flickered. "Responsibility to whom?" she asked. "The public, the media, or the same institutions that benefited from my silence." Her tone was still calm, but something underneath it had hardened. Denise chose her next words carefully. "I'm asking from the perspective of women watching at home," she said. "Many of them balance public expectations with private boundaries every day." Meghan exhaled, sharp but controlled. "That comparison isn't fair," she said. "Their lives aren't dissected globally." Denise held her gaze. "No," she agreed. "But pressure is still pressure." A pause. Meghan leaned back again, this time fully, shoulders settling into the chair as if she'd decided something internally. "I think what frustrates me," she said, "is being spoken to like a case study." Denise's brow creased slightly. "I'm not doing that," she replied. "I'm asking questions." "Questions carry assumptions," Meghan said quickly, especially from platforms that claim neutrality. The room felt smaller now. Denise didn't raise her voice. She didn't interrupt, but her posture changed, barely noticeable except to those trained to read rooms. "Then let me be clear," she said. "This isn't an interrogation." Meghan smiled again, short, almost amused. "It never is," she said, "until it is." The words hovered behind the cameras. No one moved. No one adjusted a light or cleared a throat. Everyone sensed it. The conversation hadn't escalated yet, but it had shifted direction. Denise straightened slightly. "All right," she said. "Let's reset." Meghan's eyes stayed locked on hers. "I don't need a reset," Meghan replied. "I need precision." That was the moment, not the argument, not the confrontation. The moment Denise realized this wasn't going to be about sharing, it was going to be about control. She smiled again professionally. But something firmer settled into her voice. "Then let's be precise," Denise said. And somewhere between that sentence and the silence that followed, the conversation crossed an invisible line, one neither of them could uncross. The calm room remained. The microphone stayed steady. But whatever this was meant to be, it was no longer just a conversation, and it was only beginning. The silence after Denise's last sentence wasn't empty. It was weighted. Meghan held her gaze, lips pressed together just long enough to suggest she was choosing restraint rather than searching for words. Denise, meanwhile, didn't rush to fill the space. She had learned through years of panels, debates, and difficult interviews that silence often revealed more than questions ever could. Precision, Denise repeated calmly. "All right." She glanced briefly at the notes resting on the small table between them, then deliberately pushed them aside. Not theatrically, not for effect, simply removing them from the equation. "No scripts," Denise said. "No headlines, just clarity." Meghan's eyebrow lifted almost imperceptibly. "Clarity is usually subjective," she replied, especially when the interviewer decides where it begins. Denise nodded. "That's fair," she said. "So let me ask this differently." She leaned back slightly, her voice steady. "When people say they find you difficult, what do you think they mean?" The question didn't sound aggressive, but it wasn't gentle either. Meghan let out a short breath through her nose. Not a laugh, not quite irritation, but something close. "They mean I don't perform gratitude," she said. "I don't soften my words to make others comfortable." Denise didn't interrupt. "They expect humility in a very specific shape," Meghan continued. "And when I don't fit it, suddenly I'm difficult." She paused, then added pointedly. "That label is rarely given to men." Denise inclined her head. "I agree," she said. "But some women watching might say they've seen moments where your tone feels dismissive." Meghan's eyes narrowed, not sharply, but decisively. "Dismissive of what?" she asked. "Bad questions." The room tightened again. Denise met her gaze. "Dismissive of people trying to understand you." Meghan's fingers curled slightly against the arm of the chair. "Understanding requires listening," she replied. "Not recycling assumptions." Denise's voice remained calm, but firmer now. "Listening goes both ways." A beat. Meghan leaned forward this time, not aggressively, but deliberately, as if stepping closer to a boundary she intended to test. "I am listening," she said. "What I won't do is apologize for not responding the way people expect." Denise nodded slowly. "No one's asking you to apologize," she said. "But conversation does require engagement." Meghan's mouth curved into a faint smile. Controlled knowing. "Engagement doesn't mean compliance," she said. Denise didn't smile back. "True," she said, "but it also doesn't mean shutting people down." The temperature in the room shifted, not dramatically, but unmistakably. The soft lamp light, the neutral walls, the carefully chosen decor all felt suddenly irrelevant. This wasn't a living room conversation anymore. It was a negotiation of ground. Meghan crossed her arms loosely, not defensive, but closed. "I find it interesting," she said, "that assertiveness from me is framed as shutting down." Denise held her gaze. "I find it interesting," she replied evenly, "that you frame every challenge as misrepresentation." The words landed cleanly. Meghan blinked once for the first time since the conversation began. Her composure flickered, not broken, but strained. "I didn't come here to be reframed," she said. "I came here to speak." "And you are," Denise said at length. The air went still. Meghan's lips parted slightly, then pressed together again. She leaned back, eyes briefly flicking toward the microphone before returning to Denise. "This is exactly what I mean," she said. That tone. Denise's expression didn't change. "My tone hasn't shifted," she said. "Your tolerance has." Another pause. Behind the cameras, no one adjusted their stance. No producer intervened. The format allowed this. Two women uninterrupted, nowhere to hide behind panels or applause. Meghan inhaled deeply. "Let me be very clear," she said. "I will not be spoken to as if I'm a problem to be managed." Denise nodded once. "And I won't conduct an interview where every question is treated as an attack." Their eyes locked. Not anger, not yet, but a collision of expectations. Neither was willing to surrender. Meghan's voice dropped slightly, quieter, sharper. "Then perhaps this format isn't as neutral as you think." Denise didn't look away. Or perhaps, she said, neutrality feels hostile when it doesn't affirm you. The sentence wasn't loud, but it landed harder than anything said so far. Meghan froze for a fraction of a second, just enough. Her posture stiffened, shoulders squared now. The ease she'd arrived with, controlled, distant, superior, had shifted into something more brittle. That's an unfair characterization, she said, and frankly a lazy one. Denise exhaled slowly. We're not here to flatter, she said. We're here to talk. Meghan shook her head once sharply. No, she said. You're here to challenge, and you're dressing it up as curiosity. Denise's jaw tightened, not visibly but unmistakably. Challenge is part of conversation, she said. If that feels uncomfortable, that's worth examining. Meghan leaned forward again, this time closer, voice low but edged. I've examined myself enough for 10 lifetimes, she said. I won't do it on demand. The silence that followed was different from before, heavier, closer to a breaking point. Denise folded her hands together, fingers interlaced, grounding herself. Then let me ask you something simpler, she said. What would respectful questioning look like to you? Meghan didn't answer immediately. Her eyes searched Denise's face not for warmth but for leverage. Finally, she spoke. It would look like trust, she said. And I don't feel that here. Denise absorbed that. I'm sorry you feel that way, she said. But this conversation isn't about comfort alone. Meghan straightened fully now, arms dropping to her sides. Then we're done pretending this is a safe space, she said. The words hung in the air, and for the first time the question wasn't where this conversation was going. It was how much longer it could continue before someone stood up. The word safe lingered between them like something already broken. Denise didn't rush to respond. She didn't soften her posture, didn't tilt her head sympathetically. If anything, she grew more still, as if deciding that whatever came next would be said plainly without cushioning. Then let's stop using that language, Denise said. Because this isn't a therapy session, Meghan's eyes hardened. And that, she replied, is exactly the problem. Denise raised an eyebrow, inviting her to continue. You frame scrutiny as neutrality, Meghan said, her voice steady but sharpened. But neutrality has never been neutral for women like me. Denise nodded once. I don't dispute that, she said, but I do question why every pushback becomes proof of bias. Meghan's jaw tightened because it usually is. There it was. Not shouted, not dramatized, just stated. Absolute. Denise leaned forward slightly now, closing the distance. Usually, she repeated, or always. Meghan didn't hesitate, enough of the time that it stopped being coincidence. Denise's voice cooled. And what about the times when it's simply disagreement? Meghan's lips curved, not into a smile, but something close to disbelief. That's a convenient interpretation, she said. Denise exhaled longer this time. Do you hear how final that sounds? She asked, as if there's no room left for dialogue. Meghan's eyes flicked briefly toward the floor, then back up. Dialogue requires good faith, she said, and I'm not convinced this is it. The room felt smaller now, not because of walls, but because both women were occupying all the space between them. Denise straightened in her chair. Let me ask you something directly, she said. When people criticize you, journalists, colleagues, even former allies, do you believe all of them are acting in bad faith? Meghan's fingers pressed together. I believe patterns, she said, and I believe power structures. That wasn't my question, Denise replied calmly. Meghan looked at her for a long moment. Then yes, she said, most of them. The answer landed with a dull finality. Denise blinked once. Then that leaves no space for self-reflection, she said. Meghan's voice sharpened. Self-reflection doesn't mean self-blame. And accountability, Denise replied, doesn't mean self-erasure. Meghan let out a short, humorless breath. You're very good at reframing, she said. I'll give you that. Denise didn't take the bait. I'm trying to understand, she said, but every attempt is met with resistance. Meghan leaned back, crossing her legs deliberately. Because you're not trying to understand, she said. You're trying to contain. That word changed everything. Denise's expression shifted. Not angry, but alert. Contain what? She asked. Me. Meghan said, my voice, my refusal to perform. Denise's tone firmed. No one here is asking you to perform. Meghan shook her head slowly. That's what people say, she replied, right before they punish you for not doing it. The accusation hung heavy. Denise paused, then spoke carefully. Do you hear how adversarial this has become? She asked. How every question is treated as an attack. Meghan's gaze sharpened. Because it is. The finality of it landed like a door closing. Denise folded her hands, fingers tightening slightly. If that's truly how you see this, she said, then why stay? The question wasn't rhetorical. Meghan blinked. Excuse me. If this conversation feels hostile, Denise continued evenly. If you believe you're being undermined, why continue? Meghan stared at her, clearly not expecting that. I agreed to this interview, she said. I showed up and that's appreciated, Denise replied. But participation is an obligation. Meghan leaned forward sharply now. Are you suggesting I leave? Denise met her gaze. I'm suggesting that conversations require mutual trust, she said, and right now there isn't any. The room went silent. Meghan's face tightened, not in anger, but something closer to insult. So now I'm being told when I belong in the room, she asked. Denise's voice stayed level. No, she said. You're being asked whether you want to be. Meghan stood very still, then she laughed once. Quiet, controlled, empty. This is remarkable, she said. Truly, Denise didn't respond. You invite me into a space, Meghan continued. Frame it as conversation, then imply that my discomfort is my problem, Denise replied softly but firmly. Discomfort isn't the issue, she said. Dismissal is, Meghan's eyes flashed. I haven't dismissed you, she snapped. I've disagreed. Repeatedly, Denise said without allowing any possibility that you might be challenged. Meghan stood now, not abruptly but decisively. Her chair scraped softly against the floor. For a second, no one moved. I think we're done here, Meghan said. Denise looked up at her. That's your choice, she said. Meghan picked up her microphone wire, unclipping it with practiced ease. For the record, she said, this was never a fair exchange. Denise rose slowly as well, not to block her, not to follow. Fairness isn't agreement, she said, and questioning isn't cruelty. Meghan turned toward her fully now, eyes blazing. You're proving my point, she said over and over. Denise didn't flinch, and you're avoiding mine. The words stopped Meghan mid-step. She turned back once more. Good luck with your narrative, she said. I won't be part of it. And with that, she walked toward the edge of the set. The microphone stayed live. The cameras didn't cut. And the question left hanging wasn't whether this interview had failed, but what would happen when the silence after her exit finally settled. The sound of Meghan's footsteps faded down the hallway. No dramatic slam, no raised voices, just absence. For a moment, the studio felt larger than it had all evening. Too quiet, too exposed. The microphones were still live, the cameras still rolling, the chairs still facing each other, one of them now empty. Denise remained standing. She didn't rush to sit, didn't adjust her jacket, didn't look toward the producer off camera. She simply stood there breathing evenly as if allowing the silence to finish what words could not. Then she sat carefully, deliberately. The chair opposite her looked untouched, but the tension it held hadn't left with Meghan. It lingered, settling into the cushions, the table, the air itself. Denise folded her hands in her lap. Well, she said quietly, one word, no commentary. The control room waited. No one interrupted. Denise looked toward the camera now, not as a host filling time, but as someone choosing precision over reaction. There are moments, she began, when conversation reaches its limit. She paused, not for effect, but because the weight of the sentence required space. When questions are no longer heard as curiosity, she continued, but as threat, dialogue stops being possible. Her tone was calm, not defensive, not triumphant, honest. This program exists to ask difficult questions, Denise said. Not to provoke, not to perform, but to understand. She glanced briefly at the empty chair. That requires willingness on both sides. Another pause. No one is obligated to stay, she said, but no one is entitled to immunity from challenge either. The words landed softly but firmly. Denise leaned back slightly, exhaling. In moments like this, she added, the absence of a guest speaks louder than any answer they might have given. She looked directly into the camera now, and we respect our viewers enough to let that speak for itself. The control room cut the feed seconds later, but the moment didn't end there. Within minutes, staff whispers filled the hallway Meghan had exited through. Phones buzzed, screens lit up. Not with outrage, but with questions. Did that really just happen? Who crossed the line? Was there one? Denise remained in the studio longer than usual. She thanked the crew quietly, individually. No victory laps, no visible frustration, just professionalism. Later that night, the clip would circulate. Not the walkout itself, but the stillness afterward. The way Denise didn't chase, didn't justify, didn't apologize. And that final line, the absence of a guest speaks louder than any answer they might have given. It would be quoted, debated, replayed, not because it was cruel, but because it was restrained. As for Meghan, no statement came that night. No post, no clarification, only distance. And in the space between what was said and what wasn't, the story found its ending. Not with outrage, but with a question no one could stop asking. If the room wasn't hostile, why did she leave? Some conversations don't end with answers. They end with silence. And silence can be the loudest response of all. If you enjoy tense, character-driven interview stories like this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next confrontation.